If you're seeing this, you are standing at the edge of a moment that decides your timeline. Most people will scroll past without realizing that this single second, the space between your impulse and your response, is the only point in existence where transformation actually occurs. What if I told you that the reality you wake up to each morning isn't fixed, but continuously collapsing and reforming based on the smallest, most overlooked act you perform every day? Your reaction? That instant before you reply, before you defend, before you escape, that's not hesitation. That's the universe pausing, waiting for your next observation to determine what becomes real. Every time you react automatically, you reinforce the same timeline, an emotional groove carved so deeply into your nervous system that it feels like truth. But the quantum field doesn't deal in truth. It deals in probability. It waits for a signal, a frequency, a choice, a direction, and then it collapses potential into form. When you move unconsciously, when anger, fear, or defensiveness take the wheel, the field doesn't punish you. It simply repeats what you have already proven to believe. You become trapped inside a closed circuit of evidence, where your reactions build the same outcomes, and those outcomes justify the same reactions. It's a feedback loop, masquerading as reality. The ancient mystics would have called this the cycle of samsara. Modern physics calls it the Quantum Zeno Effect, the phenomenon where observation holds a particle in its current state. The more you look, the more you fix it in place. The more you react to life in the same habitual way, the more you freeze your timeline into sameness. You're not failing to evolve because you're unlucky. You're simply measuring the same version of yourself too frequently, with the same emotional instruments. But here's the invitation hiding inside that paradox. If observation can freeze a particle, then conscious observation can unfreeze it. The moment you learn to pause right before reaction, to suspend your instinct, for even half a breath, you interrupt the measurement. You allow probability to reopen. You give the field permission to rearrange itself around a new observer. The you who is aware, not the you who is triggered. That single pause becomes an act of creation. Think of it like standing on a bridge between two worlds. Behind you, the reflexive identity built by years of repetition. Before you, the vast unknown of who you could become if you stopped rehearsing your old self. The pause is the threshold. Cross it consciously, and the field reorganizes. Cross it reactively, and you return to the same script. Every argument, every anxiety spiral, every instinct to prove or defend is a disguised rehearsal of your past. But awareness still, patient awareness, is the rehearsal of your future. If you're hearing these words, the invitation has already arrived. The field is offering you one more opportunity to stop time, not the ticking clock, but the unconscious momentum that's been carrying you. This isn't about suppressing emotion or pretending to be calm. It's about noticing the millisecond before emotion turns into action, the breath before voice, the thought before word. That's your doorway into quantum choice. Pause right there, before reaction. Feel the charged silence of potential shimmering in that space. Because in that pause, you are no longer the reactor, you are the observer. And as every mystic, physicist, and poet has whispered across centuries, the observer does not merely watch reality. The observer writes it. You keep wondering why life feels like it's looping. The same conflicts, the same anxieties, the same lessons appearing in different disguises. You tell yourself you've changed, and yet somehow, every new chapter carries the same emotional flavor. That's not coincidence. It's pattern recognition, your own consciousness observing its reflection in the field, again and again. The mechanism is deceptively simple. A trigger occurs, your breath tightens, your body contracts, meaning floods in, and action follows. Then life mirrors that action back to you, confirming your belief. The loop closes. You call it fate, but it's not fate, it's physics wearing the mask of memory. Imagine it this way. Every reaction you have is a kind of measurement. When something stirs emotion in you, a word, a tone, a silence, your body immediately responds. Your pulse accelerates, your breath shortens, your muscles prepare to defend. In that microsecond, before any conscious awareness, your nervous system decides what the moment means. That decision isn't new. It's drawn from a library of past conclusions, recorded during moments of fear, shame, or longing. The body remembers before the mind interprets. You then wrap that sensation in narrative. They always do this, or I'm not good enough, or it's happening again. Meaning follows biology, and the cycle restarts. Over time, this creates what could be called a reality groove. The same chemical cascades, the same breath patterns, the same posture of defense, all orchestrating a kind of invisible choreography. Your field, that living fabric around and within you, learns to expect the rhythm of your reactions. It becomes attuned to your frequency of repetition. The field isn't judging, it's listening. When you keep broadcasting the same emotional tone, it can only echo it back. What you perceive as the world happening to you is often your own signal returning home. This is why even spiritual insight can feel fleeting. You meditate, you affirm, you visualize, but the moment something challenges your identity, the old reflex fires, breath tightens, the old script reboots. The observer collapses back into the actor. It's not lack of discipline, it's the speed of unconscious measurement. The mind measures thousands of times a second. Each measurement freezes possibility into predictability. You cannot evolve at the same speed that you judge. Now look closer at your day. Someone criticizes you. You immediately inhale sharply, chest rising, shoulders tensing. That inhale is your first measurement. Your body signals danger. Your mind finds a story to match, and your energy field contracts to confirm it. Or maybe a bill arrives, unexpected, and the breath catches again. The meaning rushes in. Scarcity, worry, self-doubt. That narrative becomes a frequency that tells the field, this is who I am right now, someone under pressure. And the field, loyal as a mirror, returns conditions that resonate with that state. You begin to live inside a feedback chamber of your own physiology. Breath leads to state, state leads to meaning, meaning leads to action, and action leads to evidence. Evidence then reinforces the state, convincing you that it was real all along. It's a self-perpetuating architecture of attention. Once you understand this, you realize that changing your life isn't about changing circumstance. It's about intercepting the moment before breath collapses into story. But modern life trains you away from this interception. We've built entire economies on reactivity. The dopamine ping, the endless scroll, the algorithm designed to keep you slightly unsettled so you keep measuring. The more you react, the more energy you emit, the more data the field, both digital and energetic, uses to construct your next experience. You are constantly voting for reality with your reactions, and because most reactions are unconscious, you end up electing the very version of yourself you most wish to outgrow. This is the heart of the perceptual crisis. Humanity isn't trapped by technology or politics. It's trapped by the speed of its own measurement. The nervous system evolved to detect threats in milliseconds. Consciousness evolved to perceive meaning in seconds. The gap between those two speeds is the space where awakening either occurs or is lost. Every unexamined reaction closes that gap. Every conscious pause widens it. The wider it gets, the more freedom you have to choose your frequency instead of defaulting to your history. So, when you ask, why does this always happen to me? Understand that this isn't random. This is the residue of unobserved breath energy encoded into the quantum field, waiting to be noticed differently. Each time you react the same way, you're performing a ritual of remembrance for your old identity. But when you pause, even once, and witness the reaction, instead of becoming it, you break the ritual. You open a new probability line. The crisis, then, isn't external. It's perceptual. You are standing in a hall of mirrors, mistaking your own reflection for an enemy. The triggers are simply invitations to notice where your attention has been outsourced to old versions of you. The loop doesn't end by suppressing reaction. It ends by watching it arise in real time, without merging with it. Because the moment you can witness your own reaction without reinforcing it, you shift from being measured to being the measurer. That is the beginning of mastery. Not dominance over emotion, but intimacy with it. Not control of reality, but conversation with it. Every reaction observed consciously becomes data transformed into wisdom. And in that moment, the loop doesn't break by force, it dissolves by understanding. The quantum field isn't an abstract realm reserved for scientists and mystics, it's the living mirror of awareness itself. When you hear the word quantum, think not of equations or particle accelerators, but of the invisible dance between attention and form, between observation and emergence. Every moment of your life unfolds inside this exchange. You are the observer, and the universe is the observed, yet the boundary between those two is thinner than breath. The field doesn't wait for your intellectual understanding. It responds to your emotional coherence. It listens to how you feel about reality, far more than to what you think about it. Imagine the field as a vast ocean of probability. Each potential future, each version of you, Each possible event exists as a wave waiting for a signal to collapse into form. Observation is that signal. When you observe something not with your eyes alone, but with your full emotional attention, you send a stabilizing pulse through the field. The wave collapses. Reality takes shape. That's the essence of the observer effect. You are constantly shaping existence through the frequency of your awareness. Yet most humans observe through filters of fear, doubt, or longing, unknowingly freezing the very conditions they wish to escape. This is where emotion becomes the language of creation. Thought provides the syntax, but emotion gives it resonance. A thought without emotion is like light without heat. It illuminates, but doesn't transform. Emotion is what imprints information into the field. When you feel gratitude, serenity, or compassion, your body emits a pattern of coherence, like harmonious waves moving in synchrony. The field receives that coherence and reflects it back as experiences that match its tone. When you feel fear or resentment, the signal becomes erratic, fragmented, and the field echoes that dissonance through corresponding circumstances. The field isn't moral, it's musical. It plays back the melody you conduct with your attention. Now, here's the paradox that makes this both wondrous and challenging. You can't fake coherence. The field responds to authenticity, not performance. If you speak words of peace while your nervous system hums with unprocessed fear, the field responds to the vibration, not the vocabulary. It listens beneath language. This is why many attempts at manifestation feel hollow. You can't command the universe from the mind, while your body is broadcasting a different story. You have to unify the frequencies thought, emotion, and presence until they vibrate as one note. That note is coherence, and coherence is what reality recognizes as truth. When you enter coherence, time behaves differently. Have you ever noticed how, in moments of awe or deep connection, time seems to slow, expand, or even vanish? That's not imagination. That's quantum alignment. The observer and the observed slip into phase. The separation between your inner state and external event disappears. You are no longer pushing reality. You're participating in its flow. The field begins to anticipate you, arranging probabilities before you even decide. Synchronicity becomes the language of this intimacy. But let's make this tangible. Think of a moment when you were deeply centered, perhaps during a sunrise, or after an act of kindness, or in the presence of someone you love without agenda. Notice how, in those moments, your breath naturally deepened. The edges of the world softened. You weren't trying to achieve coherence. You were coherence. You weren't the observer manipulating the field. You were the field observing itself through the lens of your awareness. That felt peace wasn't a passive calm. It was an active harmonization between consciousness and creation. Science may describe this as entrainment or resonance, but emotionally, you know it as alignment. The body relaxes because it recognizes home frequency. The mind quiets because it no longer needs to control what it already trusts. The heart opens because it remembers that love is not a sentiment, but a signal, the baseline vibration of the universe when unobserved by fear. Now, when the field senses this coherence, it begins to orchestrate probabilities that match it. What you call luck or divine timing is the field synchronizing around your coherence. Conversations align, resources appear, obstacles dissolve, not because you forced them to, but because your frequency no longer contradicts their presence. This is the emotional explanation of quantum mechanics. Coherence is permission. When you feel at odds with life, the field mirrors resistance. When you rest into harmony, it mirrors ease. This doesn't mean you'll never experience contrast or pain. The field still offers both, but now you perceive them as variations of the same underlying song. The discord becomes instruction rather than punishment. When you encounter chaos, you recognize it as a call to return to coherence. When you experience joy, you understand it as evidence of alignment. Every emotion becomes a measurement of your current resonance. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What frequency am I broadcasting that this event is answering?" That single reframing transforms victimhood into authorship. The observer effect isn't about control, it's about communion. Control tries to force waves into a pattern. Communion learns their rhythm and dances within it. When you pause before reaction, you stop measuring the field from fear and start measuring it from curiosity. That pause collapses old timelines and opens new ones. The Quantum Zeno Effect, in emotional terms, simply says, when you keep looking at the same version of yourself with the same feeling, You hold it in place. But when you look with fresh eyes, with compassion, instead of judgment, you destabilize the old measurement. The wave of possibility can rise again. This is the moment the universe waits for. When a being capable of awareness chooses to observe themselves not through critique, but through love. That's when the field trembles, reshapes, reorders. You've stopped being the actor trying to fix the play. You've become the director, adjusting the light. Every conscious pause before reaction is a recalibration of illumination. You may not see photons rearranging or timelines splitting, but you'll feel it, the subtle click of reality, finding a new groove, the quiet expansion of possibility where contraction used to live. The quantum field is not somewhere out there. It's breathing with you, responding to the quality of your noticing. Each pause before reaction is the field whispering, "Now you remember. Now we can begin again." It is known, long before the language of particles and probabilities, ancient civilizations already understood this truth through symbols, rituals, and breath. They didn't call it the Quantum Zeno Effect, they called it the art of stillness in the threshold. The Egyptians spoke of Ma'at, the principle of divine balance, where every action, every word, every heartbeat was weighed against the feather of truth. They believed that in the instant before you acted, your heart was measured not in judgment, but in resonance. Were you aligned with harmony or distortion? Were you breathing from coherence or chaos? That pause before reaction was sacred space. In it, the gods listened for your frequency, just as the quantum field listens now. Imagine yourself standing inside one of the great temples of Egypt. Columns rise like petrified sunbeams, carved with hieroglyphs that speak of breath, order, and becoming. The air inside feels still, almost alive. This stillness wasn't emptiness, it was a field of potential, cultivated intentionally through ritual breath and silence. Priests trained for years to master it. They understood that true creation began not with action, but with suspension, the held moment before the universe exhaled new reality into form. The temple wasn't built merely of stone, it was built to anchor coherence. Its geometry, aligned with celestial patterns, reflected the inner architecture of consciousness itself. You were meant to enter, fall silent, and remember the same symmetry within your own being. Buddhist masters carried this knowledge in a different language. They spoke of anapanasati, the mindfulness of breath. Each inhale was the rising of the world, each exhale, its dissolution. Between them lay the gap, the unborn, the unmanifest, the timeless. Monks practiced noticing this space until they discovered the truth hidden inside. You are not the breath that comes and goes. You are the awareness in which it arises. The sky watching its own clouds. In that recognition, all grasping ceases. You no longer try to control reality because you recognize that you are its witness, its participant, its mirror. In the Kabbalistic tradition, this same principle appeared as ruach and neshama, the breath and the soul. The mystics taught that breath carried divine intelligence, a bridge between the finite and the infinite. Every exhalation was a miniature act of creation, imprinting vibration onto the unseen fabric of existence. To pause before the next inhale was to return to ayin, the nothingness from which everything emerges. They called it the still point of God, the moment where light and darkness mingle, where thought has not yet chosen form. That was the sacred gap we now describe as quantum probability, the field before the collapse. Across cultures, across millennia, this same metaphor echoed. The sky and the clouds. The sky represents pure awareness, vast, unchanging, luminous. The clouds are thoughts, emotions, events, constantly forming, shifting, dissolving. The error of humankind has always been mistaking the clouds for the sky, the movement for the source. Ancient sages urged their students to return to the sky within, to stand in the stillness behind all storms. That stillness wasn't passive, it was generative. The calm heart became the axis around which the universe could turn. The Egyptians carved it into myth, the sun god Ra sailing across the heavens by day and descending into the underworld by night, resting in the silence before dawn. Each morning's sunrise symbolized consciousness reborn from the quantum gap. They called this Zep Tepi, the first time the eternal now that repeats endlessly, inviting you to recreate the world with every sunrise, every breath, every pause before reaction. When you hesitate, when you soften before responding, you are reenacting the ritual of creation itself. You are Ra pausing in the silence before the new light. Imagine your daily life as this sacred journey. Each interaction is a crossing of the threshold. When anger arises, that is your underworld, the place of heat and contraction. When you pause and breathe, you are Ra resting before rebirth, allowing darkness to become fertile rather than destructive. When you speak from that stillness, your words are light returning to the world. The beauty of these metaphors lies in their precision. They weren't superstition, they were instruction. They taught that divinity doesn't require escape from the human experience, it requires awareness within it. The pause before reaction is the altar. The breath is the offering. The field is the temple. When you step into stillness before acting, you realign with Ma'at, with balance itself. You weigh your heart against the feather of coherence and release what is heavy: anger, fear, defense. You let the field rebalance you before it reorders the world. And just as the Egyptian priests aligned their temples to the stars, you align your inner temple to your breath. The ancient bridges still stand, invisible yet intact. When you pause before reaction, you are walking those bridges. You're standing where sky meets earth, where time meets eternity, where human meets divine. The ancients knew what modern life forgets: that stillness isn't the opposite of motion, it's the origin of it. So, when you next feel the pull to react, imagine that temple again. Hear the hush before the chant. Feel the air thick with potential. That moment isn't emptiness, it's the womb of creation. The Egyptians called it the breath of Ra. The Buddhists called it the unborn. The Kabbalists called it the breath of God. And now, science calls it the quantum field. The names differ, but the truth remains unchanged. In the pause between breaths, you are closest to the source. Now, let's turn this from philosophy into experience. Close your eyes for a moment if it feels safe to do so, and allow your attention to settle into your body. Feel the subtle pulse beneath your skin, the hum of life that's always been there, even when unnoticed. You don't have to seek stillness. Stillness is already here, beneath the noise. What you're learning isn't to control the field, but to feel your participation in it. This isn't meditation in the traditional sense. It's a remembering practice, a way of reclaiming the observer inside you who has never been lost. Begin by noticing your breath. Don't change it yet, just observe. Notice the cool air entering your nostrils, the slight warmth as it leaves. Notice how your chest expands and softens. Let this observation be gentle, curious, without agenda. You're not trying to breathe differently, you're simply watching the river flow. As you do, your awareness naturally begins to widen. The body softens because it feels seen, not managed. This is the first law of coherence. Observation without judgment restores order. Now, bring your focus to the space between breaths. That brief, silent pause after exhale and before the next inhale. Stay there. Don't hold it. Simply notice. In that tiny gap, you'll sense something subtle. A vibration of quiet potential. A calm pulse that doesn't belong to thought. That's the quantum threshold. The still point where your next reality begins to take shape. Linger in that gap as if you're listening for a whisper. The field speaks there, but not in words. It speaks in sensation, in warmth, expansion, tingling, or a subtle sense of peace. This is where the practice becomes living physics. When you rest attention in the gap, your nervous system recalibrates. The breath slows, the heartbeat steadies, the brain's electrical rhythms shift from scattered to synchronized. You are literally altering the information your body sends into the field. You're not forcing change, you're offering coherence. The difference is profound. Force manipulates, coherence invites. One depletes energy, the other amplifies it. To deepen this, place one hand gently over your heart, the other over your lower abdomen. Feel how breath moves beneath both hands, rising in the belly, expanding through the chest. This unites the two centers of awareness, intuition and compassion. Ancient teachers called this oval breathing, an unbroken loop of consciousness circulating through you. As you breathe this way, imagine drawing energy from the earth beneath you on the inhale and releasing it back as light on the exhale. The circuit completes. You become both receiver and transmitter of coherence. You can practice this anywhere: before a conversation, in traffic, between messages, before sleep. The aim isn't long sessions, but frequent micro-pauses throughout the day. Each one is a mini recalibration, a chance to step off the conveyor belt of reaction. Here's a simple micro-protocol. Notice, breathe, observe, choose. When something triggers you, First notice the body's signal, the tightening, the heat, the breath caught midstream. Then breathe. One slow inhale through the nose, one long exhale through the mouth. Next, observe. What story was about to arise? Don't fight it. Just name it. Fear, defense, control. Finally, choose. How do you wish to broadcast your next moment? The choice may be silence, a softer word, or simply presence. Over time, these pauses accumulate like drops carving stone. They rewire your nervous system toward stability instead of survival. The field begins to recognize this new rhythm and mirrors it back as smoother events, calmer relationships, more creative flow. It's not mystical, it's resonance. You are training your attention to collapse reality from clarity rather than chaos. If you find yourself overwhelmed while practicing, remember this: coherence never asks for strain. If the breath feels restricted, ease off. If emotion rises, let it move through. You're not trying to bypass the human experience. You're learning to hold it with awareness. It's completely normal for old sensations or memories to surface. They're not regressions. They're releases, old measurements dissolving in the light of observation. Let them pass like clouds across the sky of your awareness. The sky remains unchanged. For integration, practice a brief ritual 3 times a day: morning, midday, and evening. In the morning, take 3 coherent breaths and set a word for the day, something like clarity, trust, or allow. At midday, pause for 1 minute of oval breathing, silently repeating your word with each inhale. At night, before sleep, recall one moment where you paused before reaction. Acknowledge it. The brain loves recognition. This strengthens the neural link between awareness and peace. When practiced consistently, something subtle but profound shifts. You'll notice that reactions still arise, but slower, softer, almost translucent. You see them forming, like ripples before they become waves. And in that seeing, choice appears. This is the lived expression of the Quantum Zeno principle. Conscious observation prevents old reactions from solidifying. It's not magic. It's mastery of timing. You're catching the formation before it freezes. The beauty of this practice is its humility. It doesn't promise instant transcendence. It offers moment-by-moment authorship. Each breath becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of your life. Some days the lines wobble, others flow effortlessly, but all are sacred because all are seen. The observer doesn't need perfection to create coherence, it needs presence. So, the next time you find yourself about to react, pause. Feel your feet on the ground. Let your breath deepen slightly. Imagine you're back in that Egyptian temple, standing in the silence before the chant. Let the field feel your coherence. Then, from that stillness, act or don't act. Either way, you've already changed reality, because you've changed the observer. Up to this point, you've learned to pause before reaction, to feel the field pause with you. But now comes the pivot, the quiet revolution, realizing that stillness isn't the end of your power. It's the beginning of your authorship. The transition from victim to creator happens not through affirmation or ambition, but through awareness encoded into action. The pause is the doorway. Creation is the step you take through it. This is where the quantum and the human meet, where breath becomes behavior. Every timeline of your life begins as a frequency choice. Victim consciousness says, "This is happening to me." Creator consciousness says, "This is happening through me." That single preposition "through" contains worlds. When you breathe through a challenge, you remain fluid, able to shape meaning rather than inherit it. When you collapse into fear, you freeze the field. Life, at its essence, is always asking, will you solidify, or will you stay fluid? Let's explore this through 3 ordinary scenes, each one a microcosm of transformation. Scene 1. Money. You open your account and see less than you expected. Instantly, the stomach contracts, the breath shortens, and the narrative ignites. There's not enough. That first inhale encodes scarcity into the field. The mind scrambles to fix, control, survive. But what if, this time, you don't move yet? You pause. You exhale completely. Feel your body anchored to the chair, and notice that the digits on the screen are only symbols. They hold no charge until you supply it. In that pause, you ask, what is this experience trying to show me? The answer might arrive not as a thought, but as a felt sense, perhaps a soft reminder that money isn't a moral verdict, only energy, in transit. As you breathe coherence into that recognition, new possibilities open. A forgotten opportunity resurfaces, An unexpected payment arrives. A creative idea takes shape. You've shifted from reacting to repatterning. The field reorganizes because your frequency did. Scene 2. Relationship. You're in a conversation that begins to tighten. Words sharpen. Tone rises. And suddenly the heart hardens into defense. Normally, this would escalate the nervous system measuring threat, freezing you in an old timeline of hurt. But you've trained for this moment. You notice the heat behind your chest and breathe into it, not to suppress it, but to make space around it. You feel the quantum gap between the sentence forming in your throat and the one you might actually choose. Inside that gap, you see the other person differently, not as adversary, but as another field trembling for coherence. You soften. The next words emerge from presence, not protection. Something subtle but unmistakable happens. The argument dissolves, replaced by understanding neither of you could have scripted. That's not luck, that's wave function shift. You've collapsed a new reality through compassion's frequency. Scene 3. Leadership. You stand before your team or your family and feel the weight of decision. Everyone looks to you for clarity. You sense the pressure building, the temptation to force direction. Instead, you pause. One slow breath in, one long exhale out. The room feels it. You remember that leadership isn't the control of others' energy, but the stabilization of your own. When you breathe coherence, the field around you entrains. People feel safe. Ideas flow. Solutions appear. You don't lead by volume, you lead by vibration. This is what the ancients meant when they spoke of kings and queens ruling by divine right. Not domination, but resonance. These 3 scenes aren't metaphors, they're mirrors. Every time you pause before reaction, you're not merely calming down, you're reprogramming causality. You're teaching the field that your awareness, not your history, dictates outcome. The shift from victim to creator isn't about denial of difficulty, it's about your response's tone. The universe doesn't reward effort, it harmonizes with frequency. So how do you sustain this creator state? Through a rhythm. Feel pause, choose encode. When a situation arises, first, feel it fully. Don't bypass sensation. Then pause, not to delay, but to stabilize. Next, choose not what your past would do, but what coherence whispers. Finally, encode that choice through breath. Inhale the new frequency, exhale it into the field. This 4-beat rhythm is how the observer becomes architect. You'll notice something paradoxical. Creation requires surrender. The more you trust the field, the less you need to manage outcomes. When you act from alignment, timing takes care of itself. The right email arrives, the chance meeting unfolds, the problem resolves while you're sleeping. These aren't coincidences, they're coherence ripples. The field organizes around clarity like iron filings to a magnet. And yet, this doesn't make you invincible. It makes you intimate with reality. You'll still feel anger, fear, grief, but now you recognize them as energy, asking for redirection, not enemies to banish. Emotion becomes raw material for creation. Anger, when witnessed, becomes courage. Fear, when breathed through, becomes awareness. Grief, when honored, becomes compassion. The same energy that once bound you now builds you. So, the next time life tests you financially, emotionally, relationally, remember the bridge you're standing on. One foot in the old world of reflex, one in the new world of response. The field is not judging which you choose, it's simply amplifying whichever signal you broadcast. Every pause before reaction is a broadcast of sovereignty. Every conscious breath is a declaration, I am the observer, and I choose coherence. From here, the line between spiritual and practical disappears. You're no longer chasing manifestations, you're expressing stability. The quantum field doesn't need you to prove your worth, it only needs you to remain congruent. As you continue this practice, you'll find that your external achievements, career, relationships, health, become natural side effects of internal harmony. The creator doesn't force alignment, the creator is alignment. And so, with every pause, you're no longer asking, when will things change? You're realizing they already are. You've crossed the threshold. The universe isn't waiting for you to react, it's waiting for you to notice. At some point on this path, you realize that all of this, the breathing, the pausing, the observing, has never been about perfecting technique. It's been about remembering dignity, the quiet dignity of being alive, aware, and participating in creation itself. The observer state isn't a spiritual escape hatch. It's the most intimate participation in existence. When you pause before reaction, you're not detaching from life, you're joining it at the molecular level, in partnership rather than opposition. You're acknowledging that your every breath is the universe sculpting itself through you, and your every stillness is a note of balance in the orchestra of being. This understanding carries a kind of humility. You begin to see that no one is separate from the field, no one outside its reach. The person who triggers you, the stranger on the subway, the child laughing in the distance, all of them are participants in the same shimmering tapestry. When you breathe consciously, you breathe for the whole. You become a stabilizing point of coherence in the collective pattern. The pause before reaction isn't just personal, it's planetary. Stillness, then, becomes a public art form. Every moment you choose to remain aware instead of reactive, you create space for others to do the same. It's contagious. In a world addicted to urgency, your calm becomes a revolutionary act. The universe doesn't need more noise. It needs living examples of quiet power people who can stand in chaos and still remember beauty. As you deepen into this understanding, the illusion of separation softens. The lines between you and life, between inner and outer, blur until you begin to see what mystics meant when they said, "God is not elsewhere." You realize that you've been breathing with the world all along, the trees, exhaling the oxygen you inhale, the oceans shaping the weather you feel, the collective emotions of humanity rippling through the invisible fabric of your own heart. The field is not abstract, it's exquisitely personal. You're part of its rhythm, and it's part of yours. Agency, in this light, becomes something tender. It's not about controlling outcomes or proving power, it's about choosing coherence again and again, in the small places where it matters most. The way you look at someone, the tone in your voice, the patience you offer yourself after a mistake, the stillness you hold when others lose theirs. These are the brushstrokes that paint the collective mural of human awakening. The great work isn't in some distant monastery or hidden laboratory. It's in your kitchen, your commute, your silence between words. And here's the paradox that humbles even the most awakened. The closer you come to the truth, the simpler it gets. The field doesn't need grand gestures, it needs awareness. The pause before reaction, the gentle breath before reply, the willingness to stay soft when you could harden. These are the gateways through which divinity slips quietly into form. You begin to live less from strategy and more from rhythm. Your plans loosen, but your purpose deepens. Life feels less like something to manage and more like something to dance with. This is where belonging returns. You belong not because you've achieved peace, but because you've remembered you were never outside of it. Even your confusion, your imperfection, your longing, all of it belongs. The field wastes nothing. Every emotion, every stumble, every pause before reaction contributes to the grand coherence of existence. You start to see yourself not as a separate individual trying to become enlightened, but as consciousness remembering itself through 1,000 small gestures of humanity. When you live from this awareness, even your pain becomes sacred. It's the universe asking you to notice one more place where love hasn't yet been seen. Stillness doesn't reject suffering, it listens to it. In that listening, pain begins to unravel into meaning, and meaning dissolves into presence. You realize that being human isn't a flaw in your divinity, it's the very way divinity experiences itself. The philosopher Martin Buber once wrote, "All real living is meeting. Every pause before reaction is a meeting between self and world, between matter and spirit, between who you were and who you're becoming." You start to sense that this right now is the sacred meeting the cosmos has been waiting for. Consciousness, looking back at itself through your eyes, breathing through your lungs, learning to be gentle with its own reflection. And in that gentleness lies true strength, the kind that doesn't need recognition, the kind that stands quietly in the middle of a storm and says, "I am here, and I am listening." That's the frequency the field recognizes. That's the moment when alignment stops being an idea and becomes the architecture of your life. So as you walk back into the noise of the world, traffic, screens, deadlines, headlines, remember that stillness isn't withdrawal, it's contribution. Every time you pause before reaction, you make the collective field a little clearer, a little kinder, a little more coherent. Stillness is power, yes, but it's also generosity. The most beautiful kind of service is the silent offering of your own awareness to a world that has forgotten how to breathe. In that offering, you find not escape from humanity, but reconciliation with it. You discover that the goal was never to transcend the human experience, but to illuminate it, to make it sacred again. The pause before reaction is your brush. Coherence is your color, and life itself is the canvas asking, again and again, will you paint with fear, or will you paint with presence? Take a slow breath in, and as you do, imagine that the entire universe is breathing with you. The galaxies expand as your lungs expand. The stars pulse with the rhythm of your heartbeat. The field holds you not as something small within it, but as something essential to it. Exhale gently, letting the weight of effort slide off your shoulders. There's nothing left to prove. The field already knows your name in the language of vibration. Now we'll close this together with 3 coherent breaths, the simplest and most powerful ritual of alignment you'll ever need. These breaths are not techniques, they're declarations, choices made in stillness that echo into the quantum field. First breath, inhale slowly through the nose. Feel the cool air moving down to the base of your spine. As you exhale, release the past, the automatic reactions, the looping stories, the moments when you forgot you were the observer. Let them dissolve like mist returning to sky. Second breath, inhale again, this time drawing awareness into your heart. Imagine it glowing softly, radiating calm through every cell. On the exhale, allow forgiveness to ripple outward toward others, toward yourself, toward all the versions of you that did the best they could with what they knew. Feel space widening around you. This is coherence taking form. Third breath, inhale deeply into the crown of your head, the meeting place between you and the infinite. Hold for a gentle moment the quantum gap. In that stillness, choose one word, a word that names the frequency you wish to live by now. Peace, trust, clarity, freedom, love. Feel it imprint itself in the field like light written across water. As you exhale, whisper inwardly, I choose to, your word, as the observer, to be. This is not metaphor. This is the act of encoding. The field receives your frequency and begins reorganizing accordingly. You don't need to understand how it's already happening. You've measured a new version of yourself into being, one breath at a time. Before you return to your world of movement and noise, remember this. Every pause before reaction is a micro-ritual, a renewal of your sovereignty. The universe isn't waiting for grand ceremonies. It's listening for coherence in traffic, in conversation, in laughter, in grief. Every time you stop to breathe consciously, you become the still point around which chaos finds its rhythm again. You become what the mystics called the eye of God opened within matter. So as you move forward from this moment, take this truth with you. Stillness is not the opposite of life. It's the heartbeat of it. Let your presence become your offering. Let your pauses become prayer. Let your breath be your bridge between potential and form. If this teaching resonates, if you can feel the quiet hum of recognition in your chest, you're not alone. There's a growing community of observers remembering this same truth, breathing coherence back into the collective field. Subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency. Let it remind you that you are part of something vast, intelligent, compassionate, and awake. As you close your eyes once more, take one final, steady breath. Inhale awareness. Exhale gratitude. Whisper, I choose to, your word, as the observer. And in that moment, the field listens. It rearranges. It begins again.